Episode 1, Mermen. Mermen? Hey, welcome to a new series for Halloween, Experiences Beyond the Veil. My name is Sarah, and as your host, I'm going to take you on a personal journey through haunted cities, legends from around the world, and my personal experiences traveling through some of these areas. Each episode will cross thresholds into places where the veil between the known and the unknown grows thin, where shadows move just beyond the corner of your eye, and people and creatures from the past touch our plane. Tonight, our journey begins on the rugged northeastern coast of England. Skinning Grove, to be exact. A quiet fishing village with secrets lurking beneath the waves. So lock the door, light a candle, and get cozy with a hot brew as we explore a new mystery and touch on a past legend. Are you ready? This isn't just about ghosts or ghouls, it's about the sea itself and the strange man-shaped forms that sometimes appear just offshore. So if you're alone, or think you are, listen closely. I first heard about Skinning Grove while I was in Whitby, which will have its own episode soon because a lot of wild stuff happened in Whitby, but that's another story. Whitby is very nice. I really like it. I wanted to visit a quiet, tourist-free area. I haven't really spent much time on the North Sea, and I wanted to see some of the highlights, of course, but I also did want to just visit a more tourist-free village to get a better feeling of the area and to really soak up that vibe. Skinning Grove is a bit of a local place that tourists don't venture to because it's less about drawing the tourist money and more about, people living their lives. It is a fishing village, and it is, I think, home to 400 full-time residents. There's something raw and honest about a place that hasn't been polished for visitors. It's more authentic. The village is free from fast food places, overpriced coffee, and walking tours or boat tours or any of the other stuff that you find in some of the more polished places. And those are fine, don't get me wrong. And I like to go on those occasionally as well. But I also like to really eat where the locals eat and really get a feel for the energy of the area. Skinning Grove is on the rugged coastline where the sea crashes into large rocks beneath tall cliffs, so it looks very dramatic no matter what the weather is. And as an energy worker, I'm naturally drawn to the feel of places. And there's a subtle undercurrent of energy along this area from Scarborough to Stace and, of course, in Skinning Grove. I felt a pull to explore the area and was curious about what I would find there, especially after such a interesting time in Whitby. Late afternoon, when I arrived in Skinning Grove, the village was inviting with pastel painted houses and large rocks on the beach. The tide was out, it was windy, a storm was coming in, and after being in Whitby, I was surprised by the lack of seagulls and also small blue boats. There wasn't a lot of boats off the coast, and there weren't the non-stop seagulls, the sound, and also big signs everywhere about don't feed the birds or anything like that. It was more natural. There were people walking dogs, but other than that, very little activity because the wind was picking up. As I said, a storm was coming in. It was quiet and calm, except for the heavy wind coming off the North Sea. The waves were choppy and a storm was predicted to come in that night. So I postponed my day on the beach in favor of settling into a holiday house. I slept well, and the next morning, I knew after the storm subsided, it would be a much better day to stroll the beach and look for jet. There are jet mines all along this area, and as the cliffs crumble, jet falls and tumbles onto the beach and then gets washed out and comes up other places as well. And people also collect sea glass along these rocky beaches. Most of it's hundreds of years old. And that seemed like a really nice way to spend a day, just relaxing on the beach and walking around and seeing what treasures I could find. So that was the plan. The next morning, I worked until about 10 and made my way to the beach. The wind had laid after the storm and the tide was out. I wasn't really expecting anything. I thought, if I could find a curious stone or some sea glass, that would be nice, but it wasn't, it wasn't that important. The experience was why I was here. So as I approached the beach, the wind had laid after the storm and the tide was out. The rocky shore was covered in green seaweed, dredged up from the churning storm. It wasn't there the day before. I spent a good while just walking along the shore, watching the waves and listening to the steady rhythm of the sea. It was beautiful and very different from the Texas Gulf Coast where I live. Obviously, the sea is different than the coast, but it just felt very different. And looked different too. The seaweed smelled of salt water, and to my delight, I did find some sparkling sea glass among the stones. And it was rather sad seeing all the dying seaweed, but I noticed there were just a few dog walkers on this part of the shore. There is a special beach at Skinning Grove where I think more people are. I was just in a little cove area, and it was full of rocks and had its own personality. There were only a few dog walkers, as I said, on this part of the shore. So as I concentrated on the stony beach, looking for treasure, I felt myself slip into an almost meditative state. Between the warm sun on my face and the hypnotic sound of the sea, I was being pulled closer and closer to the water's edge. But as I got closer, I looked out over the choppy water and I caught a glimpse of something in the surf. At first, I wasn't sure what I was seeing. It appeared to be a man just standing beyond the breaker. For sure, it was a figure, tall, human-shaped, and it was perfectly still. It wasn't moving like a swimmer or a seal, and they do have seals here, but the season was off, I was told, because I did ask if I would see seals, and was told no, it wasn't the right season. I'm also sure it wasn't a trick of the light or the shadow. It was a sunny day, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't a dolphin or a porpoise, as I often see them at home. This fellow, that's what I'm going to call it, a fellow, was standing taller and was shaped like a man. I could see shoulders and arms, a head. He looked muscular and he was just standing there. So I was thinking, what is this guy doing standing in the water? Am I mistaken? And it's not a man. Is it some kind of rock or something? But this wasn't far from where they launch boats, so I can't see why a stone that large would be left. It seemed like it would be a hazard. So it was much more likely it was indeed a man. But if so, what was he doing there in the frigid water, just standing there? And where did he come from? I blinked, and still the figure was standing there, watching me. No one was swimming here. Even though it was a warm day, we were still all bundled up in layers against the cold. The North Sea is never really warm. I looked around and all the dog walkers had moved on, and I was alone on the shore. Or at least I thought I was. I suddenly remembered that I had a phone in my pocket, and as I struggled to pull my phone out of my pocket to snap a picture, because it was just too odd, and as I did, he slipped under the water soundlessly. One moment he was standing there watching me, still as a statue, and the next, he disappeared. He slipped beneath the waves and vanished. I waited for him to surface, wondering if it was a swimmer in distress and maybe I needed to do something. But there was no splashing or noise, no cries for help, nothing but the sound of the surf. It was like suddenly the sea just swallowed him up and he was gone. The whole experience was very surreal. Here I was on a rocky beach halfway across the world, alone, witnessing something appear and disappear right before my eyes. So I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching and waiting for him to reappear, or for something else to happen, and thinking, was I mistaken? I mean, I looked and I looked away and he was still there, and now there was nothing in that place. A part of me knew at that moment, or maybe before when I first saw him, that it wasn't really a person. No one was in the water on any of this stretch of beach because it was just too cold, even with a wetsuit. There was no children playing. There wasn't, people running with their dogs in the water or anything like that. It was not that picturesque, perfect, like sunny California coast. No, this was the rough and rugged coast of North England. As I stood there watching the sea, I was thinking about this man's ability to stand so still in the water. Just didn't seem right. Not to mention, where did he come from? There was no one else out here. And as I said, suddenly he was there, standing still in chest-high water with no splashing, no bobbing, no arms waving in distress, no sound really at all. I waited there for a while, and then I went back to the holiday house to dig around and see if there was an explanation. I was curious if, there was some sort of rock formation or something that's only visible for a split second, which didn't seem likely at all and didn't seem healthy either, because ships do move in and out of there. So yes, at this point I was still looking for a logical explanation. And even though I do work as an energy healer, I always try and find a logical explanation before jumping into believing that it's something mystical or magical. But there are those special times when the veil is thin and we do have these magical experiences. Could this have been one of them? Well, while I was digging around, what I found was something fascinating. Legends of mermen tied to the waters around Skinning Grove. It turns out Skinning Grove isn't just any fishing village. Its history runs deep into the fabric of England's northeastern coast, shaped by generations who lived and worked with the sea's unpredictable nature. The village name itself comes from Old Norse, likely meaning the Grove of the Skinners or related to those who work with animal skins. This hints at the Vikings' influence in the region, brought by Norse settlers centuries ago. The Viking legend still echoes here, mixed with the rugged coastal life. For centuries, the people here depended on the waters, but they also knew that it could be very dangerous. In times past, fishermen would tell stories of strange shapes seen in the water, figures that weren't quite human nor quite fish. These tales have been passed down for generations. And to my surprise, I found there's even a mural here in this village dedicated to mermen. So while this entire area of England is rife with mythology, legends, and folklore, I had no idea I was in an area that had merfolk. This was very different. The more I researched, the more I found, and I welcome you to research online too if this speaks to you. One of the most enduring legends of this area is the merman of Skinning Grove, if you could believe that. Unlike the mermaids we hear about in pop culture, mermen are mysterious creatures, sometimes seen as guardians of the sea, sometimes as tricksters. They're said to have a human torso, but tails like fish, with skin that glistens like scales under the moonlight. I can tell you the figure I saw didn't glisten per se, but it was also midday, under bright sun. Not really when you expect to see something supernatural or mystical, but in these sacred places, in these places where the mythology is strong, where people report lots of interesting encounters, you can tell the veil is thin. So the more I read about the merman and the mythology, you could tell this was not your typical Disney story. I think more of a fey creature that could gut you and smile while doing it rather than the My Little Mermaid princess trope. The story goes that long ago, a local fisherman was out fishing when they caught something in their net. And as they were pulling it in, it was flopping around, and they could see it wasn't a fish and it wasn't quite human. Now the story kind of divides and turns into something else. One part of the story says that they brought it back to the village and put it in an old house. They tried to talk to it, but it only made odd screeching noises and sounds, and they couldn't really communicate with it. And it would only eat raw fish. While deciding what to do with him, because it was obviously male, I don't know how they knew, maybe it had a beard, somehow the merman was able to escape and was spotted near the shoreline, where he made his way back to the sea. There's another legend that says that anytime you see a merman, it was a warning of storms and danger lurking in the water. There's another story about mermen and merwomen being out in the water to protect the village or to lure unsuspected people into the water to drown. These stories remind us that the sea holds secrets and powers beyond our understanding. Of all the things I thought I would see here, a merman was not on the top of my list. But there's similar legends appearing up and down the British coast and even across Europe. In some places, mermen are protectors, and in others, they're harbingers of doom. So are they friend or foe? Guide or trickster? Are they luring people out to drown, or are they sending out warnings of storms? Or are they something else entirely? Are they aliens? Are they ghosts? Mermaids and mermen were never my jam. They were never my thing. And I know that some people are really fascinated with them and spend a lot of time studying them, but I really haven't. So I was very surprised to have this unexplained sighting. So that day on the shore, seeing that shape in the water, I felt connected to something ancient and mysterious. Was it really a merman, or was it just a trick of the light? To this day, I don't know. But in places like Skinning Grove, where the veil is thin, the line between the real and the unknown blurs like the tide. Thank you for joining me on this first journey into The Veil is Thin. And I want to know your thoughts. What do you think? Was it a merman? Was it some sort of trick of the light? Was it a fish? Was it something else? What do you think? What does your intuition tell you? And if you have your own stories, personal encounters with the unexplained, or places where you felt the veil was thin, I'd love to hear from you. You can send your tales to me at Serenity Reiki Clinic at Gmail, and your story might be featured in a future episode. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and leave a review, and share this playlist with friends who want a good Halloween chill. And next time we'll head to a foggy, surreal night in New Orleans, where shadows walk at night and ghosts play in the road. It's a story you won't forget. Until then, keep your eyes open. The veil is thin. Reiki blessings.